Well, here we are, back again, about 20 minutes or so. Stuart will be along with his guests to talk about the development in the North Street Quarter. In the meantime, we're going to take a little trip into the clouds. At least I hope we are. My early days of flying. Now, there we go. Up and away. He said. It never actually goes to where it's supposed to, does it? It's oh dear. I despair sometimes. There we go. Let's go flying while we're waiting for the steward. I'm a very accomplished flyer now, but way back in the 60s, when commercial jets still were being tested on commercial flights, then getting on board an aircraft was something of a trauma. We sat there hoping like hell the pilot knew what he was doing, and that he would get us down at the other end. And of course the pilots didn't know what they were doing, and they did get us down at the other end. But then again, air crashes became front page news, and it seemed always there was a crash just before I was supposed to fly. And so I wasn't the best flyer. Then one morning, somebody at the radio station I was working at, said, "Oh, someone's got to go up in a light aircraft and do traffic reports." Ha ha ha, I said, "They're not getting me into that." Guess who they came knocking on the door to? Hayes, you go out, you do the traffic reports. Well, I had no choice. I couldn't say no, I had to do it. So indeed I did. And away I went each morning, getting up at about 4:30, driving out to the airport and getting there about 5 o'clock, marching over to the far side of the airfield and getting into a Cessna 172, taking off, soaring above the city and passing on information about what was happening in the traffic. Wow. Took me 2 or 3 days to get used to the fact that this is what I was going to do twice a day. But then eventually I began to calm down and began to quite enjoy it. I enjoyed it so much, in fact, that I fell asleep one morning. I dozed, and the pilot said, "I think your station is calling you." And I heard the magic words, and now we're going up above the city, above the traffic, to see what was happening on the roads. So I opened my eyes, looked down, and immediately began to give a report. And the report was that there was a big jam of buses near the Oak Street Bridge, which went over the Fraser River. Wow! what a report. And then as we turned the aircraft and flew away, I realized that this was the bus terminal. I had just said that there were traffic jams of buses, and I'd been looking down at where the buses congregated before they set out on their morning routes. It's nothing like a great report. The pilot turned to me and he said, "You know, you've got this job licked. It's a bit boring, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it is really. No, I mean, not much to say other than what's going on in the traffic. I try to brighten it up a little bit with a little quip here and there, but right, tomorrow morning," he said, "you get in the left-hand seat and I'll teach you to fly." And he did. And I was fortunate to have almost a year and a half of a flying experience. I logged 400 hours on the Cessna. I logged a couple of hours on a twin-engine aircraft and a couple of hours on other aircraft. I was the luckiest man in the world. And he put me into some pretty awful conditions. And we would fly up. I would give a report, and then we would do some what's known touch and goes. In other words, you land, you circle, you land, you circle, just to get some practice in. And we did. And one morning, a gust of wind took it, and I thought that the wing was going to be ripped off. Well, he grabbed the stick and managed to get us out of trouble. But it just shows the sort of thing that if you're going to be a professional pilot, that you have to put up with. So confident did we become on flying around together that he would set little tests, and he would say, there are clouds on the North Shore over the mountains. Why don't we go over and see if we can break the wings of this aircraft? Yes, let's do that. And we would deliberately fly into this mucky weather and get churned around and watch the wings, knowing full well that they wouldn't fall off. But daring. And it did turn out to be a lot of fun. I have to say, it turned out to be a lot of fun. A couple of other incidents. I used to take VIPs up in the afternoon and say, okay, here are some pollution issues and so on and so forth. And one afternoon we got my good friend, but also a colleague, Mrs. Grace McCarthy, who was the Deputy Prime Minister at the time. And we got out onto the runway and away we went. And a jet had taken off just before us, and it was a fairly still evening. So you can't see them, but the whirls of air, of course, by the jet's wings are still there. And sure enough, we got 3 or 4 feet from the ground, and away it went. We damn near lost the cabinet minister. The Deputy Prime Minister. Once again, he came to the rescue, flipped it over, and we managed to save the day. The other item that I think was worth reporting is that we flew backwards. Have you ever flown backwards, he said. And this young chap was about 21 or 22. He was a nice young fellow. We bought him a helmet and nicknamed him the Red Baron. And he was to die in tragic circumstances in a plane crash later on. But he was a nice young man and very helpful and lots of fun. And so we went, and he said, we need a marker. And the plane travels forward at about 100 miles or so an hour. Actually, it's a little over 72 miles for the takeoff speed. And he said that the wind this morning is particularly strong. So he put the nose of the aircraft into the strong wind, and we watched the bridge below. And although we were keeping airspeed, the plane started to travel backwards. So here we were in reverse, in a plane, in the sky, watching the bridge recede while the plane powered forward at the correct speed and the wind pushed us back. And that's the sort of nonsense that we would get up to. And there are lots of other stories I could tell you about my flying experience, but perhaps this last one will bring something of a smile to your lips. I was trying very hard to impress who later became my wife, my girlfriend at the time, Valerie, and I said, would you like to come flying, dear, and come out with me this afternoon, and we can go and we'll go and do some traffic reports, but we'll also take a look at the Vancouver from the air. How lovely. Yes, she said, that'd be super. Anyway, we got settled into the plane, I taxied out, checked with the tower, yes, we were all okay, we were about to take off, there's nothing in our way, rolled it out onto the runway and roared down the runway ready to take off. And the tower came on and said, MLA, is the call letters of the aircraft. You're going down the runway the wrong way. Oh my goodness me. We had to screech to a halt and take off the right way. She still married me. Well, that's my flying experience. I suppose I should fly off now. Till the next story, the next tall tale. Tiddlywip.
Now you could hear me. That was a flight of fancy from the past. It wasn't really a flight of fancy. Unlike some of my tall tales, every word in that was true. So it is now. Let's see. It's 49 minutes. It's 10 to 10. We are expecting our guest in about 5 minutes, and Stuart will be along to question him and ask questions about this very controversial development in the North Quarter. It's been an ongoing thing for quite a number of years, and it's had 2 or 3 developers who, having taken on the job, have fallen by the wayside. So this latest one is taking on something that has had a very bad track record, and it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. One of the key things I think that everybody is worried about in Lewes is that the conditions under which the contract is let calls for a certain amount of the building to be what is called affordable housing. Well, the trouble is that phrase is how long is a piece of string? What is an affordable price? First of all, some of the dwellings that will be built in this complex are going to be very, very expensive. So that means, presumably, that as you go down and you knock things aside, and you say, right, this is what we're going to do in terms of the affordable stuff. Is what is affordable? If some of those houses are 2 million, surely affordable would be 750,000. Are the people for whom affordable housing is supposed to be built, are they capable of buying the so-called affordable housing, helping to alleviate everything? That's sort of the sort of thing that, and the other thing is, of course, this is a very, very expensive project. So how expensive, and where's the money coming from? Lots of questions. One of the things that has been because now Lewes has gone very green in terms of its governance. One of the issues that has been raging in social media here is that an awful lot of mature trees are going to be cut down. Now, much as we don't always agree with the Greens, the one point they make is, look, you're going to cut down mature trees. One of the things that mature trees does is in the respiratory cycle, as it were, is the rejuvenation of oxygen, and breathe in nitrogen, breathe out oxygen, or vice versa. And what happens is that the trees and plants play a vital role, and a whole swash of trees has to come down if this project is to go ahead. And one of the questions that is being asked is, what are we going to do in terms of replacing these very vital trees? And some people have said, well, what the contractors call for is that for every tree that is pulled down, they'll replant 2 or 3. But it's also pointed out that it'll be 30 years before some of these trees start to mature. And are we actually going to be without one of nature's filters, if you like? One of the things that nature is going to do. Are we? I don't know. The answer, my dear, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind because I don't know that anybody has got a satisfactory answer. But anyway, I don't want to take the fire out of Stuart's interview, and so we'll not interfere too much. Let's see what. Well, let's have a little. That's a bit long.
Andrew, hello. Fine. Good to see you.
So there we go.
I'm looking at your CV. I'm very envious.
I think we've got time to play the Bloody Past and the Racecourse, because that's another controversial topic. Let's do that. Vroom, vroom. The other day I felt a warmth between myself and Mole and Ratty, the two little characters from Wind in the Willows, as I sat on the banks of the River Ouse and let it drift by. Vroom, vroom. Today I feel more like Toad of Toad Hall, the animal that was always getting himself into trouble because of his excesses. Vroom. But horsepower is the essence of this episode, because horses played a central part in the history of Lewes. And as might be expected, were often at the centre of violence, adding to the history of a bloody town. Horses, of course, were nothing unique to Britain. Cavalry had been a major part of warfare, and peaceful farming from time to time immemorial. But for Lewes in early times, they were an important part of its economy. The Domesday Book, the first ever audit of England in 1086, records that anyone selling a horse in Lewes should pay to the reeve or estate manager a penny. The buyer also paid a penny. So a horse tax was in place more than 1,000 years ago. And so the horse took centre stage from the earliest of Norman times. I've shown you the tilting grounds where knights on horseback tried to unseat each other. But that was nothing compared to the violence that Lewes races brought to the town. But I get ahead of myself. Lewes was one of the most famous racecourses in history until 1965. The fourth oldest in the country, racing began in 1727, although some argue there is evidence it was 26 years before that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lewes. It's the final race meeting here at Lewes, Monday, September the 14th, 1964. The ground is firm and the wind is straight across the course. The runners for the first race, the Cuckmere Apprentices Handicap, are on their way to the start. Saucy Lad representing Tom Masson in the purple with the gold star. Number 11 is Nimberg. And away they go. They're off and racing, and Buzz made a bright start there and leads in the early stages. And now a little bit of a rise as they race past the mile marker and head towards the right-hand turn, which will bring them into the home straight. Closing stages with less than 100 yards left to travel. It's Buzz pulling clear, and Buzz goes on to win by about 3 lengths to Misty River in second, Saucy Lad back in third, Great Lady, Nimberg Wave, Methane, the Wolf, and St. Kieran.
In that year, after almost 300 years of horse racing, it closed down for good, mainly because it had no electricity, no running water, in fact, no facilities at all. Yet in the late 18th century, it attracted royalty, the big gamblers of the day. and it produced some champion racehorses over the years that brought great races and great feats to an otherwise pretty but blustery track atop the Downs. Considered by racing folk as the greatest racehorse of all time, Eclipse raced there in 1769. The Derby winner of 1793, Waxy, was a Lewis-trained horse, as was Charlottetown in 1966. Great jockeys rode there, such as Lester Piggott and Gordon Richards. And Barry, you've, although it started in 1720 or so, you weren't here then, but you were, as a very young boy, involved in this racecourse.
Yeah, I certainly was, yeah. I'd say I was born on race day, 29th of August 1950. My mum's side of the family were all racing people, going back hundreds of years probably, so, you know, my gran used to take us up here.
It's very quiet and serene today, so what was it like on race days up here?
Very, very noisy. Hustle and the bustle of coaches coming up here, cars. I mean, all these places over here were car parks. You had all the horse boxes, the tote men, tic-tac men shouting the odds and everything else. Lots of entertainment going on, you know, and it was very, very busy. A 4-mile race which started right down the bottom of the hill there. The horses used to run right round there as far as you can see, and come back down here to the winning post.
Right.
They used to have 2 winning posts. They used to have a 5 furlong winning post and a 6 furlong winning post. But what they did, they made the 6 furlong winning post another furlong away from the stands, because they both wanted to start them on the straight. Otherwise it was unfair, so they had a straight run.
Right.
In 1914, I think it was 14, they shut that down because they found it was too dangerous. And not only that, for the horses to get up that hill. They used to start them from here, they run them down there, round the loop and back again.
Oh,
and
right.
that made 4 miles, but it had to be like the best out of 3 or something.
Right.
So some of them horses run 12 miles
Yeah.
just to win a race. They had 10 minutes break, they got back after about 9 or 10 minutes, they'd have a bucket of water, drink and wash down, and back they used to go again. After a while, it just phased out a little bit. It used to be a 3-day meeting in August, and then it got to that it was just going to be a day a year. And it got to the stage where it was just one race, and all the horses in that race were trained in Lewis. And the guy that wrote about it, you know, he said this is probably going to be the last day.
There are many in Lewis who are still resentful that the course was closed. It brought a good deal of cash to the town. Lewis had many racing stables and a thriving racing community numbered as many as 60 establishments. But perversely, it was responsible for cleaning up the sport, despite suffering a bout of violence. The early part of the 20th century saw the rise of vicious gangs around the country. These gangs often fought each other, but to keep cash in their pockets, they targeted racecourses. They would secretly ease their way into courses and then meet up to viciously attack and rob bookies. Racegoers, and even jockeys. They were feared at race meetings throughout Britain. And so it was on a June afternoon in 1936. London villain James Spinks up at Lewis for an attack on bookies. They gathered, some 30 strong, on the edge of the racecourse, ready to pounce. And pounce they did. They attacked and savagely beat a bookie, and managed to rob him. But not known to them, 2 CID officers had been posted in the grounds. The 2 detectives alerted their fellow coppers and raced towards the gang. According to some reports, a rival gang got into the act and all hell broke loose. It must have been some sight. Villains scattering in all directions. Keystone cops were in full chase, and the excited racegoers panicked and dived for cover. But it was the police on this day at Lewes Racecourse who passed the winning post. They managed to nick 16 of the gang, took them to Lewes, where they were sentenced to long prison terms. That put an end to the decades-old practice of course hijacking by these fearless and vicious gangs. A real feather in the cap of the Lewes coppers. Nabbed. Pulling you aside, locals will whisper in your ear that Graham Greene's Brighton Rock was really about Lewes Racecourse. They say the gang fight in his novel was based on the events of Lewes in 1936. To think that Pinky strode this course, what a ghost to have here now. You're live, as they say.
Good show. Good morning, everybody. This is Stuart Dorby, and I am presenting my Conversations with Stuart Dorby program for Mirador Television, and it's been taken place in the White Hart Hotel. My guest this morning is rather a polymath and a designate Zen at the same time. You're involved in so many kind of things, and you are a denizen of Lewes, and we know what that means, don't we? Yes.
Thank you.
Right, and also you've got an MBE.
No, not me. That's one of my colleagues.
Oh, I see. Right. So you have a business called Planning Rising, and is it Andrew Simpkins Limited or Planning?
Yeah. So just to explain how we got involved with the North Street site, myself and 3 or 4 other people from Lewes were unhappy with the proposals being made by the previous landowner, Santon, and in particular, we were concerned about the need to provide affordable workspace, affordable housing, and the ability to actually do the development at all, that it would be financially viable. So we set up a community-led company called Lewes Phoenix Rising, which prepared an alternative plan for the site. To cut a long story short, as we had thought, Santon sold the site in 2019, or put it on the market in 2019, and a developer called Human Nature, which is a highly sustainable developer, came along and raised the money from local people to buy the site and prepare an alternative plan, which is regenerative of carbon, which provides genuinely affordable homes and workspaces, and is a new low traffic neighbourhood for Lewes. All of the things that Lewes Phoenix Rising have been hoping to achieve, especially with biodiversity net gain and ecological benefits as well. So that's how I've been involved in this. And then Human Nature asked me to work for them in getting the scheme through the planning system, which I've been doing now for a year. And I'm very happy to be doing it.
Okay, so you've actually outlined, my first question, which was going to be, what is first thing is what do you think is the project, and what why are you doing it? And you just told me that about also the project. Now, there's been quite a lot of opposition. Well, I know there's now a lot of support, but there's also a lot of opposition. First of all, there's the trees, 82,000 people against you. And then when naughty people like us come along and talk about where you say there's an 80% drop in your heating bills, I nearly fainted. I thought, well, I've been writing about this for years. So there's that one. And then there's also all kinds of other little things about affordable housing, as you may know. And it's always, I mean, I had this problem when I was doing this kind of thing in London. And you got to have Sadiq Khan. I was the chair of the Friends of Women's Clubs, which is charity, speak in the green space behind the prison. And my role was to stop this inappropriate building. So it was all built around. And then Sadiq Khan came up and he said, we're going to have more affordable housing. And I said, well, what do you call affordable? And he said, 60%. I said, are you mad? This is Harlesden. These people haven't got 60% of anything, and therefore, so forth. So now, the affordable housing here situation is a bit difficult to comprehend, because you, on the one hand, you're giving out this notion that anybody with an income of 26,000 could apply for it.
Shall I explain the thinking behind the affordable housing? So the starting point for human nature on this is what the neighbourhood plan, the local plan, developed by local people in Lewes, in particular a woman called Liz Thomas and a woman called Jennifer Chibnall. And they wanted to define affordability not on the basis of a percentage of the market price, but on the basis of a relationship with household income. So the neighbourhood plan talks about homes being affordable on the average household income, and that is a good definition of what's affordable.
Yeah, but there's 26,000 here, isn't it? So
first of all, you have to get the right measure of what's average household income, and there are a variety of measures of those. But for Lewes District as a whole, for an individual person, the average income is 26,000 a year or thereabouts. Now, if you then work out, you assume as based on information from people like Shelter and others, that 30% of your household income is paid on the cost of housing, and rent and service charge. Then the rents that we've set for the 2 and 3 bedroom flats on the site are affordable on average household income.
Which can you tell us what the figure is?
Well, the figure is 26,000 for a one person, one bed, and then it goes up incrementally. So you multiply that by 1.3, the 26 by 1.3 for a 2-person household. So you're not assuming you're getting 2 incomes, and you're assuming that it's a 1.3 increase, and so on, 1.6 for a 3-person household. And you set the rent according to that for the 2 and 3 bed houses and flats, and for the 1 bed and 4 bed affordable flats, the rate is just, the rental rate is just a bit above, only a tiny bit.
But what about if you're talking about the lowest people, what the Victorians, I hate to say this, the lower orders, working on the wage, where you're going to get an income of, say, 21,400. That means you cannot have a chance of getting a mortgage.
So there is another relationship that we've used, and we've said that the rents will be no more than what is called the local housing allowance, which is the rate of housing benefit. So for those people on income, on universal benefits, and on who are getting housing benefit, again, the rents here will be affordable for those individuals and families, small families on benefits too. So we've thought about that.
Let me just sort of digress now for a second. Not a major. There's a housing poor problem in the entire country, isn't there?
Yes.
And that is because we are a small country and a lot of people. Okay. Now, is Lewes got a housing problem? Is there a shortage of houses here?
In Lewes.
Yes.
There is. And the evidence for that is, well, one piece of evidence. You're more of an economist than I am, but one piece of evidence is about prices. So when prices outstrip, become unaffordable, that implies that, unaffordable to most people, that implies there's a shortage of supply. So in Lewes at the moment, the back to averages, but the average house price is over 11 times the average income, which puts most houses out of reach of ordinary people. So just finish the consequences of this, Stuart. So that means, and I know many people watching this will have this as their own experience or the experience of their children. That means that young people are being priced out of town. It means they're leaving town and going elsewhere. Now, sometimes young people do that, of course, but what it actually means, and the demographic consequences of this, is that the working age population of Lewes is going down relative to the total population. So it's about, as opposed to 44%, which is the average for England, it's now down to 38%, and the over 65 population is going up. So people then say, well, why are we closing our schools? Why has the Pell School closed, and why are we thinking of closing the St Pancras School? The answer to that is that the school rolls are falling. There simply aren't the young people children being born because the young people are leaving town.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, but on the other hand, Lewes has become a destination. I was talking to Charlie about this. In some towns, it suddenly becomes a place to live. But you're now up to Brighton rates, neo London rates, I would have thought.
Yeah.
And that is a sort of, as Charlie was saying, that you get these phases where, it's like Lewes is the place to be now, the place to live now. And therefore does make it unaffordable for young people. But I've had this, we've all had this problem. And I call it, this Lewes nationalism. I mean, I was in the back bar of a Cavalier dressing up for a bonfire and so forth. And I said, so how long did you live here? I said, I travel a lot, about 46 years. It's not enough. I was born here. And I nearly said, does that mean you give you the right to kill a couple of Protestants? So what I've really come to conclude, there is a certain nationalism, a sector of nationalism in Lewes, who have got this sense of entitlement if they were born here. They're entitled to be here. So if my children can't get them, they should have the right to get them before other people. Would you agree with this? With entitlement?
I think there's a intense fondness for the town from the people who live in it. I've been here nearly 20 years. And a friend of mine called Peter Messer, who's a local artist, I said, who's also, he says, if you're to be a real Lewesian, you have to be able to trace your family back to people who who built the castle wall and put the grouting in the castle wall. Well, that's one view. But be that as it may, there's two things about this town that I think. One is it's incredibly welcoming to people who come from other places. I have found that. And again, as Peter said to me, if you love Lewes, Lewes loves you. And I think that's my own experience, is that that's the case. But the second thing, though, is that, if you like, no matter where the young people come from, whether they're born and bred in Lewes and want to stay, or whether they're coming from out of town to come and live here because they want to, because it's a beautiful place, we need younger people to keep the town economically vibrant and culturally and socially.
Yes, that's true about schools vibrant as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And if the schools are closing, which is what's happening,
then the village doesn't have that kind of.
The town starts to die, and that, I believe, is what we're seeing happening now. So, therefore, when you're proposing new projects, and by the way, the great, the important thing, most important thing about the Phoenix site is it's been standing there as a wasted site, not quite wasted because there's lots of good activity going on there, but it's not being used to its fullest potential. There's some really great people working there, by the way, so let's not forget them. But and people like Pop-Up Studios have been there for 15 years, and others have been there for a long time. But you can make much better use of it, and one of the greatest uses you can make of it is to provide affordable housing, which will then help to keep the town vital and fresh and renew the
Yeah,
town.
but I mean, okay, that's housing. Have you got some kind of utopian green utopia written down there, and they're just putting houses down there just to actually, they're bona fides, if you see what I mean.
We are accused sometimes of promoting a green utopia, but I think it goes back to me to this, and this is what I've tried to do during my working life in the world of both mental health and building, and it's two things. First, I think it is now pretty well universally recognised, not entirely, I accept that, but mostly by as the population as a whole, if you like, that the climate crisis is real, and that if temperatures increase in the rate that they are doing at the moment, then we're going to have some. Already we're getting the impact of that, and it will be a whole lot worse in 10, 15, 100 years.
Well, this is I've got lots of friends now, so they're not going to have children because they're not going to bring them into this world.
So I
think we'll be all right, but our children will not be.
I think that's right. So therefore, if we're going to provide back to the homes and workplaces for our growing population, and it is still growing at the moment, it's aging as well as growing. Yeah. But if we're to provide homes and workplaces that are fit for the future, they both have to be affordable for people, younger people, and indeed for downsizers like us who are getting older and who want to move into smaller properties. But secondly, they have got to minimise the impact of on the environment and on the climate. And that means reducing carbon emissions.
While on that subject of that, as I read your flyer and so forth and so on, I've been writing about renewable energy and climate change for a long, long time. And one thing there says we are going to have about 80% reduction in heating bills. Yeah. And I nearly fell over. I thought, well, where's this going to come from? 80% of your gas bill or your electricity bill. Yeah. I can't believe it.
So well, let me explain.
How are you going to do that?
Well, let me explain, and this is part of how we help people to change the way that they live. So, in a conventional house at the moment, which is almost certainly going to be heated by a gas boiler in town, or if you're living in the country by oil, it's almost certainly not going to be properly insulated in the way that we can insulate properties now, and so you're paying for a lot of heat that leaves the building one way or another. Using probably a more expensive mechanism for generating the heat, be it gas or oil.
Well, you then go into the whole thing of air fuel pumps and underground heat pumps. Do you know how much they cost, though?
Well, in this scheme, the way that the homes will be heated is using hot water, which will be pumped around site from ground source heat pumps.
Oh no, yeah, of course, they're the reverse. They're a reverse of the fridge.
Yes,
that's they heat it up. Yeah.
So there's no gas. Yeah. So the heat will come from that source piped into the buildings, and that will also cool the buildings in the summer.
I was just thinking.
So there's no need for mechanical ventilation. And we just finish this point. So the insulation is so good that it actually does mean that your heating bills, so what you pay for the heating, will be 80% less than a conventional gas or electric.
Well, you surprise me. I don't want to upset you, but I believe in colour television when I see it in black and white. The point about it is, underground heat pumps are subject to decay very, very quickly. Yeah, not a lot of people know that. Air fuel pumps are expensive. Yeah, they're 10 grand just to install. Correct. Then you've got to get the radiators. Then you've got to have a tank. Yeah, and then the level of heat won't reach what a gas one. Yes, and I mean, I'm aware of all this, and yeah, we should try and move over. But I keep going back to this thing. Now, I'm writing about it when we were talking. We had that lovely session last Saturday. Now, I've been writing about this so long. I'm convinced there has not been enough investment in renewable energy to meet the energy mix.
Yeah.
You're still going to have, if you're lucky, a gas bridge. If you're unlucky, you need an oil bridge, and you're back to where you come. And
Yes.
you know, so, yeah.
But Stuart, I know you're very, very knowledgeable about all this. So I'm less knowledgeable than you. But what I have the same understanding as you in the cost of retrofitting some of these things into existing homes and the effectiveness of those. So, but remember, this is all new build, and it's being engineered and designed and will be constructed to the highest standard using the best equipment. Our engineer, Tellier Turner, pioneers in ground source heat pumps and in cooling mechanisms. And you know, we can't get a better engineer than that. And we are confident that it will work. And we're confident that you'll get those savings on the cost of living, which is an element of affordable living. So, you know, I'm not going to say believe me, but I'm going to say that that's it, it's the best one can do in terms of providing the evidence that it will actually work.
Well, you see, and then we get to the really $64 question: is who's going to pay for all this? Like Ovesco, which I am a shareholder. It's and they have the original business putting the solar power, but the power has come down so quick it wasn't there. So they're now trying to decarbonise Barkham.
Yeah.
And my daughter and her husband live in Barkham, well, have a business there, and they say, "Oh, nothing's happened." Well, I'm not surprised with us at Ovesco, but anyway. By the way, as we're talking about money, I've got Ovesco, so forth and so on, and it has an AGM and it gives me a dividend. So how are you going to finance all these projects? You did tell me the other day that you've had 3 benefactors to get yourself started. What is that? Yes. So just lay a few bricks or what?
No. So let me explain. By the way, I'm a great fan of Ovesco and all that they've done. And it's tough being innovative and innovating, right? It's you know, and people like Chris Rowland, in my view, are great people and have done a fantastic job. But it's difficult. So how will all this be paid for is your question, Stuart. So that in the first instance, the securing the land was achieved through 3 local people who, in a sense, philanthropists. So that they will get a return on their investment, but it's a small return over a long period of time. So how then do you fund the actual construction? Well, there's lots and lots of funding out there for sustainable new green development.
Well, are you talking about listed companies actually coming in?
So we're in conversation. Jonathan Smales, the chief executive, and our chief finance officer are in conversations with a number of funds at the moment.
Funds.
And indeed, Homes England, the government's agency to promote new housing, is also engaged in conversations about financing, doing some of the early financing to make sure that the project gets off the ground as soon as we get planning permission.
So you've got the planning permission?
We hope to get the planning permission later on this year.
Oh, that's right. But you haven't. You got somebody. You don't need planning permission for the first things you're doing now, do you?
We do, yeah. We need planning permission for everything, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. So you need to get planning permission for me, but I can't quite see that. I'm going through my phone. Look at the Ovesco. They have an AGM. They have to have accounts. You know, and please company's house. Yeah. Have you got some house accounts that we can have a look at and see?
What Company's House has the accounts of human. There are. I'm not an expert on the company structure. The company is structured as a parent company, and then the idea is that each of the individual projects will have its own special purpose vehicle. So Human Nature Lewis is
As I don't think Chris is a listed company, but if you've got a limited company, you can actually put out a thing to raise money, can't you?
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yes.
I mean, I did twice. I did it once and twice to actually get the money in to actually do the thing.
Yeah. I mean,
and I get a dividend or that every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's only about £1,000, but you know, gives me 20 quid a dividend. It all counts.
Of course. And Ovesco is a company that is owned by the community. It's a company, and issues share offers to residents of the town. That would be a model for elements of what's happening on the Phoenix. But in the first instance, I don't think a community share issue is going to be enough to finance £15 million to build the flood defences, for example.
And then 50 to do the other ones as well.
Yeah. So this is. There is an element on the site in the plans of co-housing, for instance, which will be funded through community resources, working with Action in Rural Sussex, which we're doing. So that comes something to the other point, Stuart, that there's funding available for a range of different sources. So it's funding specific for the affordable housing.
I know. I mean,
funding
I remember we
for the
talked
co-housing, funding for the infrastructure.
Yes, well, that's the whole point, you see, because Jonathan Smales and yourselves were green people. And you and I know, because we're in the same business, it might be in a different way, that there are foundations, there are all kinds of things like grants and subsidies and God knows what else. Yeah. And of course, Derek Haggard is finally against it, largely because of his own interest, because he got a bloody skyscraper opposite his house.
Well, not quite a skyscraper, but yes, a
semi-skyscraper,
well, four stories maximum doesn't qualify as a skyscraper.
Yeah, but then again, so, and then you've got the subsidies. So once you put solar powers on them, a few roofs, they'll bloody get milked. I mean, it's what I found when I'm writing about renewable energy. They're all skin, because the funding comes from these charities and and so forth and so on.
Well, which is why for a development of this scale, and people have said to me, well, why don't you do it as a not-for-profit venture, and there's all these grants and everything else available? Well, but not for a new neighbourhood at this scale. It is the case that if you like, a more traditional investment route, but using funds that are there specifically to finance green investment, so low carbon or zero carbon investment. So there are plenty of funds now that are directed to that.
You go to Summit, there's a lot of green funds now. Yeah. I can recommend Green Coats. They're a very good one.
So Human Nature is talking to a number of those funds. So that and it's very important that the money comes from ethical sources, but it's the right sort of money, in the sense of it's enough money, but they're at the right rates. Because the other issue about money, which is critically important, and which is where the Santon scheme completely failed because it never got delivered, was because the Santon scheme wasn't viable. In other words, it didn't generate enough money from the sales to pay for itself. And again, one of the things that Human Nature has paid huge attention to is ensuring that the scheme that will ultimately get planning permission will generate enough money from sales to pay for all the wonderful benefits that will come to the town as a result of this.
Are you building houses and picking up the money later, or what?
Well, again, this is all part of how you finance something like this. So you need debt finance at the start because you do. If you've got a graph here, first of all, you spend money and then you need to raise the money to get you above the line again. So first thing is that you generate debt in order to create the infrastructure, in this case, the flood defence.
Yeah, we're all good at that, aren't we?
We're all good at that. And then you need the sales to clear the debt and then start to pay for the remaining. So, but we also need to make sure that the affordable housing, for example, is provided at the start of the project. And some people say, well, you won't do that until the end and then the money will have run out and we'll never see it. Well, the legal agreement that we will have with the National Park ensures that the affordable housing is provided up front, in line with the overall housing. So for the first construction phase, which is confusingly called phase 2, 32% or so of the housing will be affordable, which is around about the percentage. 30% is the total affordable component.
So what is, this is the Lewis Eye thing. He's got
Yeah.
some interesting things to say. I don't know if you've read this.
I have. I respect Chris a lot. I like Chris. He's great.
I don't know him, but
Yeah.
then he says, interesting things, plans to provide Lewis low-cost housing and the fact that Human Nature intends to remain engaged on the site.
Yeah.
This housing is to be welcome. Good. Now, I don't get this bit. However, while much has been made of the 2,200 odd affordable homes to be provided, it should be borne in mind that this is a very small proportion of the total number of properties to be provided. Why is that? Why are you just doing 200? Is that just for starters?
No. So the national park, to its enormous credit, has set, if you like, an aspiration or a target for all developments in the national park to provide 50% affordable housing.
Mm.
Now, that's a real challenge for any scheme, to have half of the homes not generate, and in effect, an affordable home doesn't generate any profit for the owner. So to have half of the new homes not generating any profit is a really tough thing for any landowner or developer or house builder. However, it is achievable, but it's achievable on brownfield sites.
Now,
On greenfield sites where you have no infrastructure,
Yeah.
no demolition to do, no site remediation to do, no flood defences to do, and all of that. So it is possible on a greenfield site. However, on brownfield sites, in other words, previously developed sites, and especially this one with flood defence requirements, land contamination requirements, it's almost impossible to provide 50% affordable housing. So what has Human Nature done? Well, again, goes back to the viability, and the National Parks policy is clear. It wants 50%, but that's subject to viability. So Human Nature has published its viability study that shows that 30% affordable housing is achievable with a very low profit margin for the company of around 13 to 14%, which
it's not high for
viewers may
developer,
think, no, is 20%, 25% is what you would normally expect for a house builder. And Human Nature said, no, we'll take that lower level of profit, which if you're an accountant amongst us here, you will say, well, that actually makes it on the edge of being viable. The risk is too great.
So you won't have to bypass your own salaries.
Well, and then absolutely. So then you say, well, are investors interested in schemes that make a 13 to 40% profit rather than a 20% profit? And the answer is, well, you need investors that are willing to take that on. So and just to finish this little bit of the conversation, whilst the National Park has an aspiration of 50%, over the last 5 years, what it's actually achieved is an average of about 14% affordable housing on schemes.
Yeah. Back in the day,
and we're looking at doing way better than that.
Well, back in the day when I used to spend, when I was over the foreign travel and all the rest of it, I had a wonderful job called the regional editor. And I used to go around and look at these regional towns and write about inner city poverty and so forth and so on. And one of them was, my daughter was in the climate change business, and she was got an MSc in the environmental science. She got a job in that, and she was sent up to Newcastle to do due diligence on a brownfield site. And she went right round. No, you can't put it there. That's contaminated.
Yeah.
Not that's contaminated. So I can get your point about houses. But you remember the Thatcher, corporations, the whole Canary Wharf and God knows how far.
Yeah.
That were all contaminated, weren't they?
And how did you develop those sites? So you set
By
up
turning a blind eye.
two things. You set up a government corporation first of all.
Yes, quite so. Yeah,
which is financed from central government in order to get that away. And then you attract all the big businesses that come along, and then I'm not sure about blind eyes. I'm not qualified to comment on that. But in that particular case, and in others, of course, so you can go back to the new towns movement, like Milton Keynes and all the rest. The government steps in and says, we will purchase the land at agricultural land value or whatever it is, so you don't have a huge amount to spend on buying and acquiring the land. and then we will finance its development because it's too expensive for the market, and we'll work with corporations to do that. And that's kind of how that happens. None of that applies to this site in this day and age, because those mechanisms really don't exist anymore, as you know.
Back in the day when I was doing these, I went around to all 9 of the corporations, you know, and made great friends about planning and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And I suddenly, what am I going to say here? So I decided that what planners did at that certain stage was what's known as the donut effect. They built, you know, estates for what the Victorians called below orders, right around the town. It's happened here. It's happened here. It happened in Tunbridge, well, not Tunbridge Well because it hasn't got a university, but and other places. All these little towns, you know, and we've got donuts, haven't we?
Yeah.
And they do ensue social problems. That's not our business, but I'm just thinking.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, I live at Morling. I'm very familiar with Lamport. Got friends at Lamport. If we're talking about, you know, estates built towards the edge of towns, and Lewes is such that they are probably not actually car dependent if you're happy to cycle and walk, but and there's reasonable bus services. But yes, I think building in effect housing estates, which that was the both of those are reactions to post-war housing.
The kind I was brought up in.
Yeah.
Yes, in the 50s.
And then we had this urgency, a sense of urgency from a national government to pursue these sorts of developments. Things are very different now. We don't have that sense of urgency anymore. And guess what we're seeing? We're seeing our young people priced out in rented accommodation where they gain no benefit from the increasing value of the property, and even rents now becoming unaffordable.
It's very difficult.
So that's one of the consequences of actually the council house sell-off in the 1980s, I guess. But also, I think we moved away now, certainly organisations like Human Nature and others have moved away from the idea of providing housing estates on the edge of towns, because A, they're car dependent, and B, they don't generate a sense of community and neighbourhood.
That's true.
So what the model that Human Nature is pursuing here is about providing places that encourage sharing of gardens, sharing of other facilities, recycling and reuse, people being able to help one another in their day-to-day lives, people being able to have easy access to day-to-day needs from local shops and all the rest. And of course, this site is within walking and cycling distance of the town centre. It's ideal for a new communal neighbourhood.
It's a hill town, though. It's not so good for the bikes, cyclists.
No, but electric bikes are helping people to get. Electric bikes are really helping people to get over that. And this scheme will have electric bike hire, electric bike share, and electric car hire and share as part of its the mobility infrastructure.
Well, can I ask you probably the last question? What is the total cost of this project, do you think? If you realise your dreams, all your dreams.
Gosh, well, the viability study, which is available on the National Parks website, sets out all the costs. I've not been concerned with that side of the project, Stuart. But what I would say is that the money will come with the planning permission, as we've already discussed. And what I would say to that question is what is the cost of not doing this, or of doing this in a conventional way?
In terms of climate change.
In terms of climate change and or lost opportunities if this site isn't developed and stays as it is for the next 20 years. And that to me is a massive cost to the town in terms of lost opportunities for homes, lost opportunities for jobs. We're creating 380 jobs as a result of this development, adding nearly £4 million per annum of spend on the high street as a result of this development. All of those benefits get lost.
But however, you've got the death of the high street anyway, haven't you?
Well,
in most towns, you get that.
That seems to be happening.
Not just because of a shopping wasted, but business tax.
All of those things are issues, but a lot of it too is I think if you've got footfall coming to the high street, especially from a new neighbourhood within walking distance of the high street, it will have a transformative effect over time. So the cost of not doing it, to me, is way greater than any, if you like, financial cost of doing this scheme.
I wonder if I could just play devil's advocate. I've been sitting on the sidelines here, listening to the two of you. There's a lot of controversy about this. And people, no matter how kindly disposed they are towards a project, when they have to check it and pull the money out, take a look at all these cautionary things. When you sit in your board meetings, how difficult do you see the raising of the money? I mean, you say, it's okay, or do you say, my God, we've got one hell of a job in front of us?
Well, I'm not on the board of the organisation, so I don't sit in the board meetings. But what you talk about? You talk about control. I'm a consultant to the project, but there's two things I would say to that, Keith. The first is that it is always difficult raising money. All organisations, even if you like the big house builders, have to go out there and raise the money from the markets, and you have to show that you've got a product that people can rely on. If you're working in an innovative way, if you're doing things differently, it becomes even more difficult. And that's the challenge that human nature faces and has given itself and is working with. So we've got an excellent chief finance officer who's got real experience with people like Deutsche Bank and others, so understands that world inside out. And so that gives everybody, I think, comfort that the money that is out there will come to the project once we've got the planning permission that gives people the confidence. But we're negotiating that money now. But secondly, about controversy, and we know one of the things that I am very conscious of, and this is part of why Human Nature asked me to do this work, is that any change of this scale in any town would create has implications for the people who already live here, for good and for ill. So for the people who live near the site, you talked about Derek earlier and others, yes, or indeed on the site, yes, there are implications, because you can't do a construction project without impacting in some way or other on people's daily lives. So we're very aware of that and have done our best, not well enough, I don't think, and we're working on that to understand what the implications are for local people. You talked about the trees, people concerned about parking, all of these things. So we're very aware of that, and we're working hard to show how it can be managed and dealt with in a satisfactory way. So we're very aware of that and are working very hard. We're not simply doing, say, like the Generator Group did with the bus station site, over just ignoring people's concerns and just ploughing on regardless. That's not what we're about. We're about engaging with local people to come to solutions for the things that concern them.
Right, now, perhaps my final question is about the trees. That's received a lot of play the last few days. You have to cut down all these trees, and it takes time to regenerate. And suddenly you've got a council where the Greens are in power. Yeah. Not always the most practical people, I may say. I mean, did you say, "Oh my God, is this another mountain that we've got to climb"?
No, I think the way this has been handled so far hasn't been great. There's a bit of clumsiness here. So two things. One is we're going back to take another look at those trees to see which are really valuable trees that need to be preserved and which aren't, because it's a complex world about trees and their age and so forth. People with longer memories than I will remember in 1969 when the road was opened and those trees were planted to provide a screen to the ironworks at the time. And some of those people who are very knowledgeable about these things in the town say to us, well, do you know what? They haven't been properly maintained. It's actually okay to take those trees out so long as you're managing replacement. And there's a net increase in 170 trees and shrubs on the site, on the overall site, as a result of the development. So some trees coming out to allow the development to happen, for example, to allow access into the site off the causeway rather than have to go around North Street, is a price worth paying. In interviews, some even tree experts, right, who will say that. Others will disagree, and I think we're in that territory at the moment. And I think, this is one of those areas where, in order to gain the benefits that we strongly believe are there, then there are some things that you have to do that were slightly distasteful, like removing some trees, but with major mitigation for the future. So, for example, we're also now looking at creating a tree nursery on the site with advice from the tree experts in Lewes, the Friends of Lewes Tree Committee. They've suggested that we do that, for example, and we're looking at all of those possibilities.
And
I just
finally,
interrupt
when are
you?
you going to invite Stuart and I to have champagne, because the project is complete? What time scale are you talking about?
Well, listen, we all may have aspirations to be when it's complete. I would certainly invite you to have champagne if and when we get planning permission.
If we're still alive.
Well, we'll all still be alive when we get planning permission.
Talking about trees, remember Leslie and I have got this little hobby of distorting Poirot's little anagrams. You are barking at the wrong bush, Hughes.
well, bushes, trees, in world of landscape planning, those are similar. But yes, I hope we're not barking at the wrong bush, Stuart. I think we've got we have a lot of explaining to do, and that's fun. That's part of the job.
As a planner,
yeah,
right, okay. I remember back in the day at Sussex University, I was very involved in the meeting and so forth. And that answer. They got the annex thing, which was an outrage really, because oh, shut up! Oh yeah, you can go away. It's Barclaycard. I wanted money. Anyway, so the next thing is what was it?
Amex.
Yeah, Amex was an eyesore. Is an eyesore as far as I can see, because it was Basil Spence did it. You see, it's all low cost building, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then, how on earth they got permission for doing the East Bank is absolutely beyond my understanding. You talk about the little brown envelopes passing around, and I think there's all other, like, they're talking about Eton College got some land on the Downs, yeah, and nothing's happening, and I don't know. But when there was some vote on it, the Greens abstained, which didn't make any sense to me. You think to them, say, no, you can't do it. But there you go.
Well, just to finish on this, I think having been working in this field for 20 odd years now, it's because I believe in the importance of the built environment for our health, our mental health. Not having satisfactory housing, for example, has a terrible impact on people and their families. Then what I've also found during this period is that it's getting more and more difficult to get permission to build the homes and indeed the neighbourhoods that we need, because people are increasingly concerned about in particular the loss of green space.
Well, that's yeah.
Amex Stadium and others but that's why it is so critically important to take pre-developed sites like this one, the so-called brownfield sites, and make the best use of them. That takes the pressure off elsewhere, and that's why I think this is such an important scheme.
Well, Mr. Starmer said this morning that you could have a greenfield sites now.
Well, Mr. Starmer ought to come and talk to planning committees up and down the country and see whether they agree with him or not. I think that there isn't an argument for that, but it's a long way from being one. Whereas brownfield sites, absolutely, people know that they are where we should be focusing development, but it has to be the right development.
As long as the chemicals ain't coming up through the glass.
Absolutely right.
But my daughter is this. She's so difficult, but she's absolutely brilliant, And she takes on. I remember once there was some AGM which I went to, and there were 7 men. I think they worked for Bovis, and she routed a lot of them. She was 22, Yeah.
Well, just one final observation. Then one of the things that we did with Phoenix Rising was that we said, well, there are things about this that we don't like, but if there are bits of something that you don't like, then you have a responsibility. It's all very easy to say no to this, no to that. Saying no is really, really simple. then there's a responsibility that you have, I believe, to say, well, but this is what I would do. This is the alternative, because we do have a need for housing. We do have an economic problem in the town. We do have a demographic problem in the town. So if not this, then what? And that is where I think human nature are coming from. So thank you both for
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for
conversation.
coming. I mean, I think you would agree that probably it's a little bumpy ride ahead, and I hope that you'll stay in touch with us.
Absolutely.
I mean, we are prepared to take the uphill and the downhill. When you've got good news, let us know. But also, when you're hitting a problem, you said that perhaps some things have been clumsily handled. If you want to come on here and explain to smooth the path, you're very welcome.
That's very kind of you both, and I'll definitely take you up
Because
on
we
that.
are in our infancy, really. I mean, Keith had it before the pandemic, but now our figures are going up.
Yes, indeed they are. Yeah.
Great. So thank you.
Good to meet you. And indeed, I think it's been very enlightening for me. I sat on the sidelines looking as if I was sleeping. Believe me, I wasn't. Okay, Stuart?
Yeah, it's fine. And also, I've still got friends in the city, but you know all about it, who could raise money for you, but I don't know whether, it's just...
I'll leave that to others to deal with.
Yes, he's got commission.
God, how dare you!
Toodle pip.
Toodle pip.